I was at a meeting with Katie Wilson from Associated General Contractors, and we started talking about getting employment experiences and job skills experiences to kids early on in life, earlier than middle school and high school. And so I said, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's do a club at Arnold.
My name's Devin on it.
Oh,
Right, Devin.
The goal is just to kind of show them how construction comes about, bring them or educate them about the materials and then how construction works. You draw a plan, you build, and you execute the plan and see if it works.
No, because maybe more, because look, that one.
They have to stand on the chair.
That one had a lot to balance. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3. So.
How we do it?
well, they do road construction activities. They do pavement striping for lane changes and how road construction works when they build the roads and they have to do the striping. What I think was really cool was they built a detour around the bathroom based on the best traffic flow, which is a real world experience when you're building detours for road construction. They've done concrete forms, which they did today, and use wooden planks to build with concrete forms. So they're learning about structures.
So we are making a tower out of concrete and little wooden blocks, and we can make towers at any time.
We're doing like where water rushes through here, and it's like a kind of like a dam but with holes where the water still rushes through but not that fast.
It worked out pretty good. The concrete didn't turn out exactly as I hoped it would, but the kids seem to be doing just fine.
Sometimes things don't work out, but you can make different things that do. Like your plan doesn't work out, but you can make things that do.
And you can share your ideas.
Community Learning Centers is an opportunity for us to develop partnerships that if it's just a regular before and after school program, we might not have that opportunity for our community partners to come into the school. It's flexible learning, it's hands-on learning, and we just really get to have the kids have real-world experiences that they don't often get during the school day.
This meeting of the Lincoln Public Schools Board of Education for February 26, 2019 is called to order. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Byer.
Ms. Byer is excused.
Mr. Boswell.
Present.
Mrs. Danik.
Here.
Mrs. Duncan.
Here.
Mr. Mayhew.
Present.
Ms. Munkar.
Here.
Mr. Schulte.
Here.
The Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted and available at the main entrance of the room. We have minutes from our regular meeting on February 12th for approval. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, the minutes stand approved as published. Tonight, for special reports, presentations, and celebrations of success, we have Lincoln Public Schools honored as the National Champion for Computer Science School District for 2018. We have quite a few of them here. Mr. Mayhew.
Kent, would you join me?
Pretty too.
To my fellow board colleagues, in high school, I was a computer nerd, and when people ask me what I do for a living now, I like to say I'm a professional nerd. So it is with a great deal of pleasure that I read this resolution for you. This is a resolution that recognizes that Lincoln Public Schools was chosen this year. This is the second time this award has been given. It's a national award. The first time it was given to a school district in San Francisco. The second time this year it was given to Lincoln Public Schools. So I will just read this resolution. Whereas Lincoln Public Schools has been chosen as the National 2018 Champion for Computer Science School District, and whereas Lincoln Public Schools was selected for this honor because of its commitment to making computer science accessible to all students, And whereas nothing demonstrates this commitment more than the school district's goal of equal representation of female and male students in computer science courses, and whereas Lincoln Public Schools now offers computer science courses in all 39 elementary schools, 8 of 12 middle schools, and all 6 high schools, and whereas this honor would not be possible without the hard work, innovation, and curiosity of teachers, staff, and community partners and students, now therefore be it resolved that the Lincoln Board of Education does hereby congratulate Lincoln Public Schools for being named the National Champion for Computer Science School District for 2018, signed by our board president Connie Duncan and Superintendent Steve Joel, and accepting this on behalf of our computer science people is Kent Steen.
I'd like to thank the school board, first of all, for having the foresight to, back in 2013, include computer science as part of your strategic plan, and then again re-emphasizing it in the current strategic plan for the continued expansion of computer science. Also want to thank our executive team for their strong support of computer science programming in our K-12 system, and actually an update even since that, we're now 9 of our 12 middle schools, and we will be in all LPS buildings next school year. I also want to thank my director, Takako Olson, for, again, very strong support of our computer science curriculum work. At this time, I do want to show off, first of all, this amazing trophy. This is from the CSTA and code.org, just a beautiful crystal award for being the champion of CS. But the true champions are all the people in the blue shirts behind me, so I'm going to have them actually stand up and then file up, and they're going to quickly just say their name and their school, so you all get to meet the people who do the hard work every day for our students in computer science. So come on up, Craig and Matt.
Hi there, Matt Rennie, and I teach at Purtle Elementary.
Wes Sliger, Leffler Middle School.
I'm Craig Eveleth, I teach at Lakeview Elementary School.
I'm Jason Rushing, I teach at Wysong Elementary.
Susan Prabulis, I teach at Meadow Lane Elementary.
I'm Connie Heckman, I teach at Beatty Elementary.
Go Bobcats.
Teresa Searles, and I teach at Mickle Middle School.
Lori Morgan, I'm at Color Middle School.
Julie Steen, I teach at SCO Middle School.
Shannon Quibel, I'm at Lincoln North Star High School.
I'm Valerie Lackey, I teach at Goodrich Middle School.
I'm Carrie Copley, I teach at Cavett Elementary.
Hi, I'm Lori Feldman, and I am so proud to be at Lux Middle School and being the first computer science group in our area.
Amy Chittenden, Everett Elementary.
Hi, Linda Rowe at Lincoln East High School.
Howdy, Tom Allsweed, Lincoln East. Do I say the remarks now?
And if you can't see our shirts, it does say Champion of Computer Science with our social media hashtag LPS Comp Sci. And again, if I could ask for a big round of applause for our teachers, please. And that's just about 1/3 of our computer science teaching staff, but most of them got the shirt, but not everybody could make it because of conferences and everything else that they have going on. So again, thank you so much for this recognition. Very much appreciated. And again, thank you for your support.
Mr. Mayhew.
My intention in reading the resolution was to present that as a motion.
Very good. Lanny, go ahead.
I'd second that.
Very good. Any discussion? Mr. Mayhew.
Just super quick, thank you so much to our staff and to Kent especially. Kent, I know you got to go and receive the award on behalf of the district in Seattle. But this is just incredible recognition for the outstanding work that's happening in our classrooms in Lincoln Public Schools, and I'm grateful to all of you for your work. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else? Kathy.
Integrating a strong computer science program in our district is a challenge that you've met, but you've done more because you've brought parents along with their children. To those my age and older, the computer was something we had to really struggle to learn. And you've taught our kids how to help us as we're learning it. So reality, you've prepared them for the future, and that's what we do every day with education. So thank you very much.
Very good. Anything else? Very good. Laura, will you call the roll to approve item 6.1?
Mr. Boswell?
Yes.
Mrs. Danik?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Ms. Mungard?
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes. Okay, very good. We are going to move on. Tonight, we are also celebrating LPS music curriculum and instruction. Mr. Nielsen.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Lance Nielsen, Supervisor of Music, and I thought after this long, cold winter, we need a little music to warm our hearts. So on February 16th, we hosted the LPS Solo Small Ensemble, one of our many music events we host during the course of the year. And it features solos and small ensembles at the high school level. We had over 300 entries during that day, and they were able to perform and showcase what they do and be adjudicated by a judge. We also added this year a creativity room where we had students who created their own music compositions that were able to come in and get some feedback as well, which was really exciting. One of the groups that performed is a vocal octet from Lincoln Southwest. They're the vocal octet, and I'm going to let the students introduce themselves.
I'm Tyler Arnold. I'm a senior.
I'm Jake Meyer, and I'm a junior.
I'm Maddie Rushing, and I'm a senior. I'm Violet Hudson, and I'm a senior. I'm Nicole Solberg, and I'm a senior. I'm Kelly Sylvester, and I'm a senior.
I'm Hui Mai, and I'm a senior.
I'm Ethan Zappel, and I'm a junior.
Yeah. Okay, just to say a couple words. So we're the Varsity Octet. So basically, we're a student-run group, and at the end of last year, we all had to audition. A couple of us were in it the year before, but since we weren't outgoing seniors, we had to audition again to be in the group, and the outgoing seniors got to pick who was going to be in the group this year. And there's a couple of leaders, myself and Jake, we're just kind of in charge, but it's mostly just very cooperative. This year we went to solo and ensemble, and we sang a song called Set Me as a Seal. And we sang it for a judge, and we got adjudicated, and we got a lot of good feedback, and we used that to kind of go over our song and improve upon it and see what we could do better. So we're going to sing that for you today.
Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death. For love is strong as death. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. Love is strong as death. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can love thirst drown it. Neither can love thirst drown it. Neither can love thirst drown it. Neither can it drown it. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. Love is strong as death. Is strong as death.
That was very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good. Board, anyone else want to say anything?
I think we have our own octet here. Should we sing it back to
Yeah.
them now?
They have a lot more talent than we have.
we should not.
Mr. Mayhew, did you want to say anything?
I was just going to say, I already said earlier in high school I was a computer nerd, but I was also a choir nerd. Is what and I was a tenor, so I'd have been over in this area. And your blend and your voices together is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us tonight. Good job, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Ms. Mumgard has something to say as well.
I have a quick question. Just curiosity. So you're mostly seniors. What are you planning for your future? Any ideas of where you can come up first? Yeah.
Well, I'm going to UNL. I'm not going to major in music, but I would really still like to be a part of the music groups that they have there, like Big Red Singers, and then eventually auditioning for like the higher level groups. So definitely I still want to stay involved in the music stuff.
Yeah, I'm also going to UNL. I'm gonna major probably in elementary education, but yeah, I do want to continue music through the youth singers and stuff like that.
Yes, I'm in the same boat as them. I'm also going to UNL, not majoring in music, but I would like to stay in music and just involved as long as I can. So I'm mostly trying to go out of state probably, but I'm planning on majoring in psychology and probably doing university singers wherever I go.
I'm planning on going to SEC and then doing an academic transfer, but I still have to figure out what I would like to study.
I'm still up in the air, but I am most likely am going to go to Concordia and major in theater.
I applaud you for supporting the next round of Octets, because I think that's pretty awesome that you created a culture that others want to follow in, and that you then take the time to say, hey, yeah, you can do this next. So I think that's awesome.
Thank you again for coming. Okay, our next item is public comment. Blue cards are available at the entrance for those wishing to speak. I have 4 cards here. I believe each of these speakers are familiar with our process. 5 minutes. If you have any printed materials, you can hand them off to us. And I will let you know when you have 1 minute left, but you guys know the drill. So, Patrick, you're first.
Good evening. It's been a while since I've been here. I'm starting to miss you. Felt like I've been away from my family. I love coming to school board meetings, and I'm not sure whether I like most the opportunity to watch how our school is being run, our school system is being run by the school board, or if I like more seeing the celebrations of the success of our students. I love seeing that video of the children at Arnold taking part in the CLC. I love that. That's awesome. I loved hearing the Octet from Lincoln Southwest. I thought that was fantastic. I love seeing these successes. I thought it's amazing that our school district was honored in the computer science field. My son has had the opportunity to take digital art this past semester. He loved it, had a great time, was able to express himself artistically in ways he'd never been able to, in ways he'd never felt comfortable with. So I want to thank you for those opportunities. Thank you for showing us the successes of Lincoln Public Schools. We hear all too much about things that go wrong, about things that are bad, about maybe you should have called a snow day, maybe you shouldn't have done this or that. But I want to let you know that I appreciate what you do. I appreciate the work that's been done by this board, by the support staff. I think you guys are doing a great job. I really appreciate the work that's been done to help make our schools safer. I really appreciate the work that's been done to help my son feel safer at school. It means a lot to me. And I just want to say that all these good things that we have, the great Octet, those great students who are learning all of the computer science, the young men and women who are learning about construction at a CLC, they're all learning these great skills and the great techniques for problem solving and how to get along with each other. We have to keep that safe. We have to protect them while they're learning those things. We have to make sure that the schools stay safe. And I appreciate all the work that you've been doing towards that. You know where I stand on it, that we've made a great start. There's a little bit more we can do, but I'm really thankful for everything that this group has done to help my son stay safer in school, to help his friends stay safer in school. And it's done even more towards making me fall in love with Lincoln. I love this city. I love Lincoln Public Schools. I love this school board. You guys are great. I may not agree with each and every one of you on every little thing, and that's okay. But the important thing is that we all care about our students. We all care about the future of this city, and we know that the future of this city resides with the pre-K, the kindergartners, the elementary school students, the middle school students, and our high school students. And I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll always take kind words like that. Corey, you're next.
When I filled out my card, I wrote S, and then I tried to make my R a little bit longer so it looked like SNO, so you'd think I'd be talking about snow instead of SROs. But I'm not here to complain about snow days or anything like that. As I was sitting in traffic for an hour this morning, I was thinking, well, at least the city's going to get the heck now instead of the school. They got it on Monday, so the city will get it on Tuesday. I wanted to come up and talk about a couple things. I had parent-teacher conference with Ethan at Calvert last week, and I got to see the door. It got installed, and so it was recently installed, so I went and talked to Principal Brem and the staff up there, and we had a good conversation. We had a good conversation about when that homicide happened 2 months, or what was it, last February or March, when all that was going on, and kind of what they had to deal with at the time, and the fear that they had in that school, and how everybody was diving for the lock the door button to make sure the school was safe. So I know people are grateful within I know parents are, I am, and I know staff in that school are appreciative. And that door may be something small, but you never know if it's going to help, and I know it makes people feel better. So I wanted to say thank you for that, and I am hopeful that all of the schools have those in them, or are very near having all of those in there. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, I know because of the legislature, there's been some of the rehashing of school resource officers and some of the stuff that was heard here last spring. Obviously, my son's, he was skeptical, and I think I've relayed that, the talk with the junior hires, but they're going to, they're junior hires, and he would ask me about, well, how many kids are going to get arrested, this is back in the fall, because he'd heard all these horror stories about them. And so my impression, I'd ask him, and he's in 8th grade, so he's not going to tell me a whole lot, except when he feels like talking. And so this went on for a couple weeks when the resource officer at Pound showed up, and he didn't have a whole lot to say about him, and he didn't see him too much. But then one day he came home, and apparently there's like a lunch break or something where they're in the gymnasium, and the school resource officer was in there, and the best basketball student, or the best basketball player at Pound, was talking smack to the school resource officer. And so the resource officer said, that's fine, I'll play you a knockout if you think you're so good. So the best player got up there and shot, if you don't knock out how this works, but he shot and he missed, and the school resource officer, boom, drained it. And the entire gymnasium went nuts because the resource officer just knocked out the best basketball player. And from that moment on, he was okay in the eyes of those students. And I think, that's not about horsing around. Again, that's about building those relationships with those kids and starting to build that trust. And, when it came on the news about the debate a week or two ago on the resource officers, my son was asking me all sorts of questions about they're going to get banned. And I was like, they're not going to get banned. They're not going to get banned. This is one small group, and I think they're very popular. And his remark was, all they have to do is ask everybody in our school, and a vast majority really like that resource officer in their school. And I think that's the consensus in the public that I've had people come tell to me. I'd also like to acknowledge the drills were again ran, the lockdown and lockout drills were again ran early in the semester, and the communication I got from Pound Middle School and Calvert were great. I knew what was going on. They gave me the heads up. They told me they gave me some talking points and referred me to the website to think about. So again, I think that is wonderful. In talking with some of the staff and teachers, again, I know there's certainly a faction that isn't going to come up to tell me that they think I was full of it, but I've certainly had a lot of people express gratitude and express other ideas. And I don't want one side to just have the voice being critical that we have too much security or there's resource officers are bad. Or I want you to know, I want to be a voice that keeps coming here and telling you the good things about this. But I do think that there can be still improvements. I do think those doors could be in a better spot. And I hope when this all started, Mr. Wright, I believe, said, the security is based upon what the public demands. And I want to make sure we're still that voice when we're planning these new schools, when we're thinking about renovation of schools. There are, I think, the majority of the public that are concerned and want the school board to do more and try to secure those schools and find that balance where it's not a prison, but those schools are safe and secure. Thank you for your time.
Yes. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Patrick and Corey, for all of the work that you've done with us. We really appreciate that. Okay, here we go. Diane Bartles, you are next.
Hi. Do you have any handouts? I do not.
This is the microphone right there. It'll pick up your voice.
Okay, thank you. I really didn't intend to go first, but I think the president got caught in a snowdrift. So my name is Diane Bartles, and I'm a former 30-year teacher with Lincoln Public Schools. It's nice to see some of you that I know, but I've been retired for several years now, so I don't know all of you, but I'm sure you're doing good work. So my remarks tonight are going to reflect what I feel in my heart, as well as being a former teacher living in this city since 1960. I don't know the percentage of students in the system who qualified as having come from low-income homes when I first started teaching in 1964 with Lincoln Public. But today, I do know the percentages are higher, much higher, disturbingly higher, totally unacceptable. Some reports I read indicate nearly 50% of low income. And more schools are being added to that needful list. Lincoln Public Schools is so good in their mission of teaching to all. Thank you, Dr. Joel. Almost every time I hear you, you say something, excuse me, about teaching to all, and I so believe in that. I'm here tonight to ask you to consider adding money to the budget for bus passes for students through no fault of their own that they do not have funds to get to school. You all know, we can look at the Capitol building and remind ourselves of this. A democracy cannot survive without the citizens being educated. Education cannot take place if our students do not get into the classrooms. Thank you so much. I hope you will consider adding money to the budget.
Thank you, Diane. And next is Richard.
Any handouts tonight? Nope. Microphone right there. It'll pick up your voice. Just
Okay, great. Good evening, members of the school board. You'll recall I was back here on November 27th, and we talked about bus passes for low-income students. Unfortunately, this session isn't quite as lively because Liz Standish doesn't have a potatoes, cabbages, and lettuce item for us on the agenda. Rather than make a speech, I just want to tell you a couple of stories. I love to tell stories, especially when they have a happy ending. I was at home one afternoon and I got a phone call from the social worker at Adams Elementary. She told me that there was a elementary student that attended Adams, and because there was no bus to bring her to school, she rode her bicycle to and from school. Of course, with the cold weather and the snow, all of a sudden this girl is missing school. Fortunately, I had a bus pass that I was going to use myself when my current one expired, and I zipped it out there to Adams Elementary, and it was given to the student out there, and she was able to take the StarTran bus and get to and from school. But that one kind of threw me because my sense was that Adams Elementary is an area that's fairly well-to-do. And I wouldn't have expected that they would have students that would be low income where the parents couldn't afford to buy a bus pass. What that told me is that the problem of the students needing the bus passes is district-wide. You can't assume that a given school doesn't have a need for it. As far as I know, that young lady is attending school regularly. I got another phone call, which was interesting, from the social worker at West Lincoln. There was a kindergarten student that started at West Lincoln, and then the family moved out of that particular area. But the parents wanted that student to complete the year in the kindergarten where the student had started. Fortunately, there were some extra bus passes at Roper, and so the social worker at Roper got one over to West Lincoln, and as far as I know, the kindergartner is being able to continue. I kind of feel like, remember the story about Peter and the dike? Remember, the dike is leaking, and Peter starts and he plugs holes, and he uses all of his fingers, and pretty soon he takes off his shoes and he's using his toes, and the water is still gushing in. We're trying to meet this unmet need as best we can, but we need help. And I strongly urge you, as part of your budget considerations for the coming year, to include money for low-income bus passes. A system has been set up. I've had tremendous help from people, Superintendent Joel, from your staff. We have a system in place where the social workers know they can call me and I will get them bus passes. That was a system-wide email, and boy, did I get a bunch of phone calls as a result of that. I'm still behind. I still have schools that need more bus passes, but at least we're starting to meet the need. And pretty basic to me is, if you're trying to educate somebody, you got to get them to the school. You know, if they're missing, and there are all sorts of stories I could tell you about the family that the car broke down and they didn't have money to get a bus pass. North Star was able to furnish a bus pass to that student so that he could continue to come to school. And you name it, it can happen. So hopefully what we're doing is we're getting some more students to attend regularly so that they can not fall behind, so that they can move forward toward graduation and become useful, productive citizens in the community. I think that's enough. Anybody got any questions?
Nope. Thank you very much for coming again.
All right.
All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board? Okay. Our next item is the consent agenda. Staff has requested that we pull item 9580, the 54-passenger bus, 9581, the 72-passenger bus, and 9582, the 84-passenger school bus, and have it sent back to the Transportation Committee. Yes?
8.3 as well.
Yep, got that one next. Staff has also requested to pull item 8.3 and refer that back to the staff. Okay, is there a motion for approval of the remaining items on the consent agenda? Kathy?
Actually, I have a conflict.
Okay, wait, we're going to get you back again. Don?
I move approval of the consent agenda with the exceptions that you noted.
Is there a second? Matt?
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions, comments, or conflict statements? Here we go, Kathy.
I hereby declare a potential conflict of interest and abstain from voting on check number 612752 as part of agenda item 8.2.A of the agenda materials for this week. I vote in favor of all other consent items.
And Lanny?
I hereby declare a potential conflict of interest and abstain from voting on check number 612752 as part of agenda item 8.2.A of the agenda materials for this meeting. I vote in favor of all other consent items.
Okay. I also have one. I hereby declare a potential conflict of interest and abstain from voting on check number 612752 as part of agenda item 8.2A of the agenda materials for this meeting. I vote in favor of all other consent items. Does anyone else have any other statement? Wonderful. Okay, Laura, would you please call the roll on the consent agenda?
Mrs. Danick?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Ms. Mungard?
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Mr. Boswell?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes. Okay, for first reading tonight, from the Calendar Committee, item 9.1.1, Student Calendar 2021 to 2022, the recommendations. Ms. Mumgard?
Yes, it's been my pleasure to work on this committee with Mr. Neal and Ms. Bennett, and they're going to present to you the hard work that we have done for calendar year 21-22. I think one of the things I'm most proud of on this committee is that we have created a 2-year plan so that we're not in February talking about August. So we already know our calendar for next year, and we've already cleaned it up. And let me tell you, we learned our lesson, and we have been counting days. So with no further ado, please present what we've come upon.
We've split up the presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit of the background of how we organize the calendar committee and move forward, and then Mrs. Bennett is going to take us through our recommended calendar. So as you look at the slides that come with the presentation, the calendar committee is part of the joint agreement between LPS and LEA that creates different professional committees to work on tasks together, and the calendar committee is one of those tasks we work on together. There's also a list of the committee members, because it's not just Ms. Bennett, Mrs. Mumgard, and me, but we also include staff and administrators from all levels of the school. We also include members of the Human Resources Department who help us make sure that the calendar meets our requirements for our staff. And we also then, not on the committee, but essential to the development of the calendar, we meet with several community groups, including the Community Curriculum Council, PTSOs, and our SNACs and our CLCs to try to receive input from staff, students, and community members. The calendar itself is developed through basically a system that the board has developed over time, starting in 2008 and moving forward, to establish the purpose for the calendar, and I'd like to read that to you because I think it's really important. I want people to hear the reason for the calendar. Oh, and I could be putting it up on the thing. The school calendar demonstrates the district's commitment to learning. It is based on sound instructional considerations and priorities, ensuring the continuity, efficiency, and effectiveness of teaching and learning. LPS established the following calendar variables to be considered by the Lincoln Public Schools Calendar Committee in devising the student calendar. And that's on the next slide. The primary variables, as they're described, are what we begin with. So we start with these elements that have been identified by staff and community members and families as the most important elements of the calendar. Semesters and quarter breaks typically be the same for elementary and secondary schools. 4 quarters typically will include at least the minimum number of days necessary for students to reasonably learn the curriculum, and we've set that at 42. And student vacation days typically will not interrupt instruction just prior to major LPS state or national assessments. And that's when we made our largest change in 2011, when we put the semester break at the same time as winter break. The secondary variables are then, once you have that established, then help finalize the days that we'll have school and won't. And those include each student week typically being at least 3 days long. Anything shorter than that is difficult to build that momentum of learning during the week. Non-student days typically will be scheduled between quarters. That's when we'll have our longer breaks. The last day of school typically will fall after the completion of NSA other type competition, so that students that are members of the school stay members of the district throughout their participation. And whenever possible, non-student days typically will occur on common holidays. And the last little bit after the definitions is really how that lays out across the calendar itself. And I know we've seen it many times, but there might be some people that haven't seen it, and so I'm going to show it again this year. It's a video that talks about how we lay out the 180 days across the calendar that was developed by Doug Dickinson, thank you Doug, and Zachary Baer in the Communications Department. So I'll show that briefly.
Our task today is to create a school calendar for Lincoln Public Schools. We begin with 180 days. That number is determined in part by teacher contracts, state guidelines, and best educational practices. Our top priority for our school calendar is to ensure the continuity, efficiency, and effectiveness of teaching and learning in our school district. Sounds simple, but the school calendar revolves around many variables and factors that make the task something more like putting together a puzzle. So, we start with those 180 days of school. We have found that having winter break at the same time that we have semester break is the wisest academic decision for our students, and each semester needs to have the same general number of days. This factor determines why school starts earlier in August and ends earlier in May than in decades past. Our next decision is to identify spring and fall quarters, also having roughly the same number of days. But there's more. Student vacation days should not interrupt instruction just prior to any major assessments. In-school assessments typically come at the end of each quarter, which means quarter breaks occur directly after. And since there are generally more assessment days in the spring, second semester needs to be slightly longer. We attempt to avoid having short weeks of school. Again, it's not sound academically. And whenever possible, non-student days should occur on common holidays such as the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr., Thanksgiving Day, Labor Day, and more. Finally, at the end of all of these critical decisions, we have a school calendar.
Thank you again for the opportunity to come and help present the information about the proposed calendar. As the video illustrated, it actually doesn't even come together quite as smoothly as you might see there, simply because it involves so many voices, and I'm pleased to be a part of the committee. We start with those primary variables, and then we jumped to consideration of the secondary variables. And one of the things I can assure you is that there were a lot of varied conversations by many stakeholders throughout the district as well as outside the district, involving parent groups, curriculum councils, as John mentioned earlier. Some of our conversations, it's a very interesting process. I wish you could all be there at some point to witness it, because the thing that is the most heartening is that the conversations are always revolving around what's really best for kids and families, and what is educationally sound as well. Some of our early struggles involved how to end the first semester, where that should end. We had discussions about where the last student day in first semester should be, and we actually ended up in the proposed calendar for 2021-22, landed on the last day of first semester. The proposal is to end December 22nd, because by ending at that date rather than the 23rd or even 24th, we're able to actually have the start date on a Monday for the first time in almost ever. But having that Monday start was important to some folks. We also had a lot of discussion about how to end second semester, the decision about whether we recognize more holidays and then end immediately before Memorial Day weekend, or whether we would look at fewer short weeks and having the school year end a week earlier. We also even discussed how early is too early to get out fourth quarter, and while I'm sure some student voices might have differed, our other understanding was, again, as you heard, the NSAA competition schedule plays a part in that as well. And then looking at the impact of shortened weeks, especially 4-day weeks. What you have is our proposed 2021-22 calendar. And as you can see from this particular proposed calendar, it's laid out very well. We felt among the calendar committee that this had a nice balance of weeks that can involve
excellent instruction and learning going on, as well as balancing it with breaks that are necessary for everyone to either catch up or to have those natural times when families might anticipate a break. The primary kinds of things that we looked at were having semester and quarter breaks aligned between the the elementary and secondary. Having the 4 quarters include sufficient days to cover curriculum. One of the other things we always take into account is that 4th quarter we need a little bit of extra time usually there in order to offset days that are set aside for testing schedules and still involve enough time for curriculum. And having student vacation days not interrupting assessments, making sure again that we provide our students with the opportunity to have breaks, but yet also to not have those interfere with the time that they need to be prepared for assessments. The secondary, making sure to look at issues related to that last day of the year, again after NSAA competitions, also with having those vacation days on common holidays, as John pointed out earlier. I will point out to you that the calendar illustration is accurate. We have multiple ones of us, as Annie mentioned, have counted days to make sure that it's accurate. First semester highlights that you will see is the start date of Monday, August 16th, the last day of first quarter, October 15th, quarter break being Monday, October 18th, the first day of second quarter being October 19th, and Thanksgiving break, you can see reflected there. The last day of second quarter, as I mentioned, being December 22nd, and the first day of winter break being on December 23rd. For second semester, some of those highlights include the teacher workday after we return from winter break on January 4th, with students starting back on January 5th for second semester, including the Martin Luther King holiday on January 17th, and this time President's Day. The last day of third quarter would be March 11th. Quarter break would be March 14th through 18th, and that reflects the more popular option that a lot of groups had, which is to get that quarter break more in mid-March rather than earlier in March or too late in March, with the first day of fourth quarter being March 21st. Spring break, April 15th, and a new feature in this proposed calendar is Arbor Day. Having that be a break day, we've had brought to our attention that being in Nebraska and the importance of Arbor Day to our state, that might it be nice for us to recognize and acknowledge that, and perhaps encourage some tree planting or something on that day, but so we've incorporated April 29th. I will offer a correction for you. Again, the calendar has many moving parts, and despite the number of eyes on the slide that's before you, there is actually an error. So on the actual calendar graphic, it's correct. So the last day of fourth quarter would actually be May 25th for students, and that last teacher work day would be May 26th. And again, it's reflected accurately on the calendar graphic itself, with graduation being May 29th. At this time, we'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have.
Okay, Ms. Baumgart.
I'd like to add that part of the discussion that we had, I know that I have hogged being on the calendar committee for the last 4 years, but I do really enjoy it because, as Rita says, there is a purpose for how we think through how many days and when we're going to do those days. And I think this calendar is a little unusual, as you might see, because when have we done Arbor Day? And when have we done President's Day? And one might say, why in heaven's name are you doing that? And we had some very deep discussions about that, and I think one of the best comments that I heard made was that if we don't do that, we had like 3 options, and one of them didn't have as many, and we were getting out of school by, I believe, May 18th. We couldn't find justification to be in school more days than that, or 19th or 20th, something like that. And there was a variety of things, but one comment that I think that really stuck out with me is that we need to build in resiliency, and that when you don't look at February, there was no break from MLK until, I believe, really the April. I think it was in April, because it was our spring break. And that was a long time. And we were like talking about resiliency and needing for both the teachers and the kids and the need of some breaks in there. The other thing that I think was really important that we discussed was somewhat of our tradition that we have created, that Memorial Day weekend is when we have our graduation. And if we did not kind of put in a few more 4-day weeks in there, we would have had graduation be the week before Memorial Day. And we had some long discussions about the value of the tradition, value of people planning. That's just when it happens. I know my son graduates the very next year, and I have to admit, I'm already like, all right, that's Memorial Day weekend, that's what we're doing. So those were two really important things that we talked about that I think should be noted. The other thing is that, you know, it always comes up, why do we not match our spring break with UNL's spring break? And we have continuing discussions with UNL, but they plan 7 years out, is that correct?
They're through, I think, 30 now.
Yeah.
2030.
It's very, so
20,
we're,
right, 2030,
Yeah.
pardon, yeah, it'd be another
let's just say we're on
1,000
we're on their map
2030.
now. I believe we weren't before, but we're
We
on their
have to.
roadmap when they do their next planning.
2025, they will do then
Somehow we can connect.
2031 through 2040, and so we've agreed to get together
At
and
that
talk
point in
about
time.
it at 2025.
So keep saying it because we will
Thank
do
you,
it.
correct, 30.
Now, the merit it brings, I'm not sure quite about the merit it brings to many people, but, you know, it doesn't, they are big and we're big and we should be talking to each other. The last thing I just want to put on there is that, got out by that point in time, to which John has done a very good job of smashing that myth for me every year. And I had that same myth happen this past week, because in my memory is that in my childhood, we had more snow than we've ever had in the past several years. And yet the paper told me this week that unless I had my childhood in the 40s, that was incorrect. So it's another one of those myths that go, oh, so people go, why do you start so early? And yet again and again, we have to say it is slightly early, but the benefits that we have seen, the data, it is data driven. The benefits we have seen in our kids finishing all their tests by the holiday break really outweighs the other conversations that could be had. I would argue we could have conversations about how early is too early to start band camp and everything else like that, and football camp, but that's not what we do with the calendar. That's for someone else to argue those discussions. So that point being said, our calendar looks a little different. We have more holidays than we've ever done. I'm not sure if ever, I'll take that word out, than we've done lately. Some unusual holidays, but those were really the very good reasons that we chose to do it. And to hold on to traditions and the resiliency built into the calendar for our teachers and our students.
Very good. And that is why you're on calendar committee. Kathy.
Okay, so I'm looking at the calendar, and I definitely like what you did with first semester. I like that we've shortened the break to 1 day. They get a day in September, a day in October. The natural U.S. holidays of Thanksgiving Day, I think that was kind of driven because kids were going to visit grandma a day early. I really believe that.
Mhm.
And I know my teammate did that, but she needed to be at school. The one that I have a question on, just to make sure, is the starting day in August on the 16th. We don't normally start on a Monday. I don't mind the starting on the Monday, but when do high schools start? Because high school has been traditionally different. Is that still the case, that the freshmen start 1 day before the sophomore, junior, and seniors?
We set the calendar, and if we have the freshmen start 1 day and the upper class students start a different day, it's set by instruction. Our assumption is that's going to be the case. So the 16th would be for 9th graders, and then the 17th would be 10th through 12th. And I'm looking over at Dr. Larson.
Yes, the answer is yes. Okay.
I might, if I may, I might also add that a part of the conversation about the Monday start, one of the comments we frequently hear from parents, especially parents of younger children in our system, is how challenging it is for them with childcare concerns if we start with a partial week. Sometimes that presents a hardship for them. It's much more difficult for them to arrange care for, let's say, for example, if we started on a Wednesday, then they've got to arrange something special for just that Monday and Tuesday. And there are some daycare centers or other places they might have their children which some of them only offer full week options. And so then they were experiencing an additional economic expense because they still had to have their children somewhere but had to pay for a full week but only using a partial. So that was another piece that entered into our discussion about a Monday start being more convenient for families.
And the last observation is, I've heard from staff members over the year that they worry when kids are out of school for long periods of time, because we have a great many students who rely significantly on getting 1 to 2 meals a day for their sustenance. So when we don't have those long breaks, kids are less time away from a good hot meal that we provide in Lincoln Public Schools. I remember when this was a huge fight, and I'm loving that it's not. I'm loving that it's becoming ingrained, and this is how we do it. We use data, and we figure out how to make it around families, yet make sure the students are getting the best educational opportunities. So thank you for all the work you've done on this committee. And I know not to complain about it, because you have to serve on it if you complain about it.
No, you have to arm wrestle.
You got it, you win. Okay, anything else? Very good, thank you, John and Rita, again for doing this, and this item will come back to us at our next meeting. Okay, also, I'll talk slowly so John can get back to his chair. For first reading from the Policy Committee, item 9.1.2 through 9.1.12, Policy Series 8000. Mr. Boswell.
Very much, President Duncan. The next 11 agenda items come to you from the Policy Committee, where I serve with Kathy and Annie. The 8000 series of policies covers board operating procedures. We have a number of changes, some minor, some not, for discussion tonight. Item 9.1.2 is the general set of 8000 series policies. A number of these policies require no change, just reaffirmation. A number of these policies have minor changes to language, such as to make them consistent with our other policies, such as changing school board to board, school district to district, superintendent of schools to superintendent. Item 9.1.3 relates to our philosophy and vision statement. The policy currently includes our philosophy statement, but with our strategic plan, we also adopted a vision statement, and so that would be included. And again, that's the overarching vision of Lincoln Public Schools, is to prepare all students to be college, career, and civic life ready with a goal of 90% on-time graduation. Item 9.1.4 is a clarification in Policy 8001 to indicate that the statement purpose is established in state law. It's not something that the board came up with. 9.15 is a revision in Policy 8121, which takes policy and aligns it to reflect current practice, where the president of the board or designee will represent the board at ceremonial events and speak for the board. It also clarifies that the term of the president and vice president are for up to 1 year. Item 9.1.6 is Policy 8123, and this is in response to an unusual situation in another district where the superintendent of schools, who is also the secretary of the board, the superintendent was required to give notice to the secretary, which was himself. And so there was a question of when that notice was actually delivered. So this handles that situation by designating the treasurer, which is the associate superintendent for business affairs, to be the secretary for purposes of receiving notices from the superintendent. And that was at the recommendation of legal counsel. Item 9.1.7 is a revision in Policy 8130 that clarifies that committee assignments and the appointments to ad hoc committees and special appointments by the president are at-will assignments and can be changed at any time with action of the president and vice president. It also clarifies the definition of the committee of the whole to indicate how we use that with respect to our work sessions, like the one we had earlier tonight. Item number 9.1.8 is Policy 8210, which is simply to align our policy with state law, which covers what happens if there is a vacancy on the board. Our policy, the old state law used to be that you would fill that until the next election. So as an example, if a board member elected this year moved out of town in 6 months, there would have been another election in a year and a half. State law changed recently so that they would fill the remainder of the term and wouldn't have to run again in 2 years. So this brings our policy to reflect state law. Item 9.1.9 is a revision to policy 8230, which is, deals with board members attending professional development, such as the conferences and workshops put on by the Nebraska Association of School Boards and the National School Boards Association. This current policy would allow board members to attend those without any authorization other than the policy. The change basically sets a $1,000 threshold, requires presidential approval for trips that would have expenses over $1,000. Item 9.1.10 is a revision to policy 8270, which brings policy in line with our current practice of extending the courtesy to former board members to allow them to present the diplomas to their children and other relatives. Item 9.1.11 is a revision to policy 8400, which brings that, brings that policy up to date with respect to the reasons that we go into closed session. There was a difference between the language in policy and what is on our agendas. Again, our attorneys advised us to match what was on our agenda. And finally, item 9.1.12, revisions to policy 8460, which clarify the procedures used during our organizational meeting in the spring. And again, this deals with the situation with the superintendent being secretary and the associate superintendent for business affairs being our treasurer. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Boswell. That was a lot of work for your committee. Is there any discussion? Okay, Ms. Schulte.
I have a couple questions on John or Lanny, whoever might help. So first on the 8250, and this is reflected in that 8230 that says sets the $1,000 per board member limit on things. I'd just be curious where that $1,000 come from. You know, what it also says that the president gets to decide whether, you know, what sort of guidelines there might be for something to get approved or not get approved along with that.
So this is one of those areas where our policy and our current practice were out of line, or out of alignment, I should say. If you had asked recent presidents, for example, there's a conference that occurs near the beginning of the year where board members can go as part of NSBA's Advocacy Institute in DC. And board presidents traditionally have picked a Republican from the board and a Democrat from the board, and those are the two people that go. If you read the policy, by the letter of the policy, any board member could go, although there's an expense associated with that trip. And so there was the discussion in the committee was how do we bring these things into alignment, where practice has been the president decides, policy says board members can go wherever they want to go. And as we talked about it, we talked about the desire to continue that flexibility for board members to go to workshops, for instance, like an open meetings workshop that might only be $50. That's not something that we want to put a gatekeeper on. We want board members to continue their development as board members, improve their skills, get up to speed on current issues. But at the same time, we didn't want an open door for, oh, look, there's a month-long conference in Alaska that I can twist around and justify as being part of my board service, and congratulations, you get to pay for it, taxpayers, because there's no gatekeeper. So we set the threshold at $1,000. That would include a single event, so that's all the expenses associated with like registration fees, hotels, and travel. So this is basically those major conferences.
Okay, that seems very reasonable. The only other thing that stands out to me odd in this policy as I read it is that when it says in the first sentence, and it's also repeat on the back side too, where it says policy for payment reimbursement of actual expenses necessary incurred by board members, employees, or volunteers. The volunteers thing, any idea why that's in there?
So my understanding is that would be trips like, say, the band is going to go on a trip to California, and there are volunteers that go along with that trip. So maybe Mr. Neal can provide some more clarity on that.
That would be my assumption as well. You're talking about 8250?
Correct, yeah, so still related to the board operating, yeah.
That would be my assumption as well.
Okay. I see that with a band or something like that. I just don't see how that maybe directly ties to the board development. So that might just be something to consider as a committee. Okay, I had another question on 8130, I think there's just a typing error. There's some line breaks that seem to be off. Calendar committee, mayor's roundtable, just might take a look at that. And yeah.
You'll see, board members, you'll see that NASB, for instance, NASB Legislative Committee, it looks like it's on 2 lines, so we'll get that corrected before second reading.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. You answered my question on the closed session. Thanks for addressing that. Okay, 8460, the annual organizational meeting. I see it strikes out the election of secretary, but it keeps treasurer, even though the policy says who the treasurer is and who the secretary is going to be. So I'm just wondering why there's a difference in the treatment of the treasurer versus the secretary.
And I appreciate you asking about that. So that is a typo where the removal, so the secretary and treasurer, so basically where it's struck through for secretary, that strikeout needs to be removed so that it reads
So
secretary
it does
and
say
treasurer.
election
So it
of
includes
secretary
both.
and
Yep.
treasurer. Okay. Great. The last one I had is a policy piece that I've talked to a few of you guys about. I'd like to see us consider revising is 8441. It's the board operating procedures related to our order of business. And I've got just a little handout here for you guys too, so thanks. I'll pass these down. I'd just like to propose that we adjust our operating procedures, our order of business, to include the Pledge of Allegiance. As many of you guys have, gone throughout our school district, every one of our schools says the Pledge of Allegiance every day. I've stood, one of the most, I guess I'd even say kind of inspiring moments for me is I was in a middle school office where there was 0 students in sight. They were all in class, they were where they should be. And the Pledge of Allegiance started, and the secretaries set down their stuff, stood up, and said the Pledge of Allegiance. And so throughout our district, we just see over and over that we have a culture that represents, that cares about our country, is excited to be a part of our country, and honors that by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I think, first of all, just as a practice across the district that we could easily adopt here in the boardroom would be to add that Pledge of Allegiance back into our thing. Additionally, when I mentioned this a few months ago, I went back and did some research. Here in Lincoln, the city council, the county board, the state legislature, even the natural resource district all take time to say the Pledge of Allegiance. In some of those cases, it's before the meeting starts, so it's not actually a part of the agenda. In some cases, it is a part of the agenda. NASB says it, the pledge, at its meetings. Much less formal gatherings than we have here take time to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I just think as a board who leads an organization that spends time every single day saying the Pledge of Allegiance, it'd be very appropriate for us to adopt that as a part of our policy. Here in this boardroom, we can be the patriots that we're instructing our children to be. And I think one small way we can do that is to say the Pledge of Allegiance as a part of our agenda. We obviously, in addition to all those things, we hang flags up everywhere, obviously even right over here. And so it just seems like a very appropriate way for us to live out what we're asking our students to do every day. So that's a change that I'd like to propose that we make to this particular policy and adopt.
Okay, very good. Mr. Schulte, I'll let you go ahead and take that to policy committee, and they can discuss it. Mr. Boswell, do you have any comments? Anything else?
No, I was just going to say we can certainly take that to policy committee.
Do you by any chance know when the next policy meeting is?
I'm going to look to John for that. Oh, we're rescheduling it, aren't we?
For, I think, March 28th, and we need to reschedule because of an absence, but it'll be sometime in late March, very early April.
And the only reason I ask is when I was on, about 2 years ago, I brought this up to policy, and we had the same thing where we were going to try and get to it before an organizational meeting, and then the policy meetings got pushed back a couple times, and so it didn't get done. So.
Okay, they'll look at it in March then.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, that item will come back to us again at our next meeting, as well as all of the 8,000 series there. Okay, also on first reading from the superintendent, item 9.2.1, support for improvement grant through NDE. Dr. Larson.
As a part of the AQuest, the evaluation system, certain schools are identified as comprehensive school improvement eligible for a grant, and this is our notice of intent to apply for that grant for Clinton Elementary School.
Perfect. Is there any discussion? Okay, this item will come back to us at our next meeting. Also on first reading from the superintendent, item 9.2.2, the 2019 Chromebooks for distribution. Kirk, do you want to say a few words about that?
This is just our annual distribution or Chromebooks for distribution for grade 6th and 9th grade. We did discuss this with Board Technology Committee earlier when we met earlier this month. There's really nothing notable beyond it's just it requires 2 readings because of the dollar amount involved.
Perfect. Is there any discussion? All right. Wait, Annie, go ahead.
The same ones we have now.
Yes, it is the 51. It's the same model, Dell 5190. 9th grade has touch capable, and 6th grade has standard clamshell.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Perfect, thanks.
Thank you.
This item will come back to us again at our next meeting. Also on first reading from the superintendent, item 9.2.3, wheelchair school buses. Dr. Standish.
And I would ask that this item also be referred to the Transportation Committee for follow-up and then brought back to the board.
Perfect. Okay, we'll move on. Also on first reading from the superintendent, item 9.2.4, portable classrooms. Dr. Standish.
Yes, we continue to grow. We continue to have needs in pockets of our community to expand capacity where we do not have any adjustments we can make to accommodate that capacity. So we do have a series of schools, one each at Cooser, West Lincoln, Wysong, and Goodrich, and then 2 portables at East High School. And if the board has any questions, I know that Mr. Wieskamp would be happy to come and answer them. We are asking, due to timing, if the board is comfortable, we would request this be moved to action this evening. There is substantial work that needs to be completed. Of course, we'd like these up and running for the start of next school year.
Very good. So do I have a motion for that? Kathy?
I would move that we set aside our operating procedure and approve item 9.2.4, 6 portable classrooms. 6, yeah.
Perfect. Is there a second? Don?
Second.
Any discussion? Kathy?
Just an observation from someone who lived through a whole lot of portables. While Dr. Standish talked about growth, many of us remember the commitment to try and eliminate portables. And yet we grew how many thousands of kids? 4,000 kids over 5 years?
Correct.
And we're running out of space. So I want parents to know that while they're not the most preferred type of environment, they are a strong educational atmosphere for our students, and we'll do our best to make sure we put our kids back at the building, but they're gonna have to help us.
Perfect. Anyone else? Okay, Laura, will you call the roll for approval on item 9.2.4?
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Ms. Mumgarde?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mrs. Danick?
Yes.
Mr. Boswell?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes. Okay, for second reading, recommended for action, from the Planning Committee, item 10.1.1, newly annexed property to the City of Lincoln. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Schulte?
I move to approve the annexation.
Okay, is there a second? Ms. Mumgarde?
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
We talked about this last time. The school assignments are Pirtle, Lux, and East.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, seeing none, Laura, please call the roll on the motion to approve item 10.1.1.
Mr. Boswell?
Yes.
Mrs. Danick?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Ms. Mumgarde?
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes. Also for second reading and recommended for action, from the Policy Committee, item 10.1.2, Policy 5504. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Boswell?
Move approval of item 10.1.2, policy 5504.
Perfect. Is there a second? Ms. Danick?
I would second that motion.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Laura, please call the roll on the motion to approve item 10.1.2.
Ms. Mumgarde,
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew,
Yes.
Mrs. Danik,
Yes.
Mr. Boswell,
Yes.
Mr. Schulte,
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan.
Yes. Okay, we have nothing on second reading from the superintendent. Emergency actions, none. Items removed from the consent agenda, we just pulled those, so no. That brings us down to informational items and reports. Any board committees wishing to report tonight? If not, then we will go ahead and move on to the finance committee. Mr. Mayhew.
Yes, tonight we would like to review the budget calendar, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Standish.
Yes, before you, you have the budget calendar for the 1920 school year. You will notice that continues our long tradition of having multiple public input sessions. There will be 2 forums that will be scheduled in the month of June and 2 public work sessions in the month of June. And this calendar will be posted, available, and ready on our website so that people can start marking those dates and join us for budget development. It is a year-long process in Lincoln Public Schools that we just continue to keep working on the budget. And we have a new team that I'm very excited to work with this year, and we're going to work hard and get this all done for us.
Perfect, thanks so much. All right, from the Career Academy, Mr. Schulte.
I do not have a report today from the Career Academy. We heard a little bit about that earlier today in our work session. Lots of growth in student participation there, and it's looking very positive for even more growth there next year.
Wonderful. All right, the superintendent's update, Dr. Joel.
Yeah, mine will be brief. I just want to lend my voice to the teams that worked on both the ERP, are currently working on ERP, and the options task force. There's a lot of time put into that, and when we ask our leaders to step up and get involved, they always answer the bell. And those of you that have been on the board as long as I've been superintendent, we've talked about the CRP for a lot of years, and when we finally made the decision to go, the vetting process was intense, the work's intense, and so just so appreciate, as Mr. Langer pointed out, just the effort that everybody's putting in on it. And then with regard to the options task force, I had an opportunity to go on a couple of the visits, and I was obviously part of the committees. But I have to tell you, as we scoured the literature and we went to the various sites, it was really pretty clear there's great ideas out there, but we really have some great things going here in Lincoln. And so we're not behind the curve by any stretch, but we're in a position where we can really strengthen the things that we're offering for kids. So I think the future is really exciting, particularly as the SVAC group now is, approaching their 3rd month on with their work with regard to what the future is going to be. So time is going very, very quickly for us, but I feel like we're making some great headway. And then we rescheduled the GNSA meeting from last week to this week. And it's things are starting to pick up, of course, legislatively right now, and we're going to get to the point where it's going to be crunch time, and there's just a lot of cross currents with regard to the legislature. And then my last one is, we could sure do without any more snow for the rest of the year. So that concludes my report.
Very good. All right, are there any questions on the monthly financial report? All right, announcements of upcoming events for the board. Yes? Hand me that book, will you? Good job. This. No, I don't think so.
Okay, so
We're here. Okay, so tomorrow we have no, we do not. That's February. Yeah, we do have the chamber lunch. That is February. Okay, we have the chamber lunch tomorrow at 11:30. On March 5th, should I just go ahead with this one? We have the TCA joint board meeting at 8 a.m. at TCA. And on the 7th, we have the thank you teacher breakfast, 7:30 at the Governor's Mansion. And then on the 11th, of course, we have the Mayor's Neighborhood Roundtable, 5:30 at the Mayor's office. Then we have spring break, no school, all levels, the remainder of that week. And we will be back to our next board meeting on the 26th at 6 o'clock. Takes care of that. Oh, we don't. Well, I think that's what he did. Yeah, we were thinking. Spring break, we don't have a meeting, of course. All right, that takes us to public comment. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Seeing none, I have a request from staff for a closed session for items number 2, real estate, and number 7, legal advice. Is there a motion, Kathy?
I would move that we go into, at the close of this meeting, we recess and go into closed session for item number 2, which is real estate property matters, and item number 7, legal advice.
Okay, is there a second? Lanning?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, Laura, would you please call the roll on the motion to go into closed session for items 2, real estate, and 7, legal advice?
Mrs. Danik?
Yes.
Mr. Boswell?
Yes.
Mr. Schulte?
Yes.
Ms. Mumford?
Yes.
Mr. Mayhew?
Yes.
Mrs. Duncan?
Yes. This meeting is in recess for the closed session. We must have forgot to get those up there.